So let's talk about global politics. It's kind of like a high school cafeteria, right? You've got the jocks, the nerds, the cool kids. And well, that one guy who suddenly starts flipping over tables just to see what happens. For a long time, America was the quarterback, the prom king, the guy everyone wanted to sit with. But then, Donald Trump walked in, ripped up the Paris Climate Agreement like it was just a detention slip, and started a trade war with China over who has the best, most tremendous everything. Suddenly the world started looking around the cafeteria, feeling a little nervous, and their eyes landed on America's neighbor to the north, Canada. You know, the quiet, polite kid, who always has extra maple syrup, and never starts food fights. Cartoon of a smiling Canadian beaver offering a maple leaf while an angry eagle screeches in the background. Suddenly everyone's asking, "Hey Canada, what's up? You seem stable." This whole situation is honestly fascinating. It's like watching a reality show where the main character decides to go rogue, and all the other contestants have to figure out if they should team up. Donald Trump's presidency wasn't just a change in leadership, it was a full-blown rewrite of the American foreign policy playbook. One of the first and most dramatic moves was pulling the United States out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP. Now, the TPP was this massive trade deal designed to create a powerful economic bloc to counter China's influence. It was America's baby, years in the making. Then Trump came in on day one and basically said, "Nah, I'm good," and shredded the whole thing. The other 11 countries were left standing at the altar, flowers in hand, wondering what just happened. Then came the Paris Agreement on climate change. This was a landmark deal, a global pact where nearly every country on Earth agreed to work together to combat climate change. It was a "we're all in this together" moment for humanity. Trump, however, saw it as a bad deal for America. He announced the United States' withdrawal, arguing it was unfair to American workers and businesses. To the rest of the world, it looked like the biggest player on the team was not only walking off the field but also actively trying to deflate the ball. Let's not forget the trade wars. Trump's philosophy was pretty simple. America was losing, and he was going to make it win. This led to a series of escalating tariffs, not just on rivals like China, but on longtime allies as well. Suddenly, Canada, Mexico, and the European Union were hit with tariffs on steel and aluminum for national security reasons. Imagine telling your best friend you have to charge them extra for a cup of sugar because you're worried they might be a security threat. Trump repeatedly criticized and threatened to defund organizations like the World Health Organization during a global pandemic, and he openly questioned the value of NATO, the cornerstone of transatlantic security for over 70 years. Trump's "you're fired" approach to diplomacy left the world wondering if the very architecture of the post-World War II order was about to come crashing down. The world's reaction to Trump's America First doctrine was a mix of shock, confusion, and a slow, creeping realization that the rules of the game had fundamentally changed. Initially, many world leaders seemed to think they could manage him, maybe flatter him, or just wait him out. French President Emmanuel Macron invited Trump to the Bastille Day parade, and they had that famously long, white-knuckled handshake. It was like trying to pet a wild animal, hoping it won't bite. But as Trump continued to pull out of deals and impose tariffs, the charm wore off, and a sense of deep unease set in. Allies felt jilted, and adversaries felt emboldened. This unease quickly turned into action. When the United States abandoned the TPP, the remaining 11 countries led by Japan and Canada didn't just give up. They decided to go ahead without America. They renegotiated the deal and created the CPEPP, or Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was like the rest of the band deciding to go on tour even after the lead singer quit. It showed that the world wouldn't necessarily grind to a halt without American leadership. The America First slogan also had a profound impact on public opinion globally. Polls conducted by organizations like Pew Research Center showed a dramatic decline in confidence in the United States president, and a souring view of the United States in general, especially among key allies in Europe and Asia. Ultimately, the biggest ripple effect was the Trump-proofing of foreign policy. The European Union started talking more seriously about strategic autonomy, and countries started diversifying their alliances. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, known for her stoic and measured approach, gave a speech that was a thinly veiled critique of Trump's worldview. After a particularly tense G7 summit, she famously said that the times in which Europe could completely rely on others were over to a certain extent. She urged Europeans to take our fate into our own hands. This wasn't just a casual remark, it was a seismic declaration from the leader of Europe's most powerful economy. signaling a fundamental breach of trust. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron, who initially tried to build a rapport with Trump, later described his own strategy as one of direct confrontation.
You have to be credible. President Trump, he's a winner. He needs to have win-wins. Make our planet great again.
It was a direct, public rebuke. The bromance was officially over. In stark contrast, the language used to describe Canada and its leadership painted a completely different picture. When Trump was threatening trade wars, world leaders often looked to Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as a voice of reason. After one G7 summit where Trump lashed out at Trudeau, European Council President Donald Tusk tweeted, "There is a special place in heaven for a Justin Trudeau." While perhaps a bit dramatic, it captured the sentiment perfectly. Canada was the reliable friend you could count on. Canada's consistent support for international law, its welcoming stance on refugees, its commitment to free trade, while Trump was calling Trudeau very dishonest and weak, other leaders saw a steady hand. It wasn't just about complaining about Trump anymore, it was about actively looking at Canada as a model of stability. The world was taking notes on who they'd rather call in a crisis. When you compare the global reputations of the United States and Canada, it's like comparing two blockbuster movies with very different marketing campaigns. America's brand has always been about being the biggest, the loudest, the hero who swoops in to save the day, sometimes whether you ask for it or not. The American eagle symbolizes power, dominance, freedom, but under Trump, that image started to look more like an eagle that was angry at its own reflection. The reputation shifted from leader of the free world to unpredictable disruptor. Canada, on the other hand, has cultivated a completely different brand identity. Its symbol, the maple leaf, evokes nature, calm, and a quiet strength. Canada's reputation is built on being the world's consummate diplomat, the peacekeeper, the helpful neighbor. It champions multilateralism, funds international aid programs, welcomes immigrants. While America was building walls, Canada was publicizing its welcoming immigration policies. This created a powerful contrast on the world stage. The US appeared as a nation contracting inward, while Canada presented itself as a nation reaching outward. This reputational divergence had real-world consequences, particularly in the competition for global talent. As the US tightened its immigration policies and the rhetoric around immigration became more hostile, Canada became an increasingly attractive destination for skilled workers, entrepreneurs, and international students. Canada's reputation as an open, tolerant, and stable society became a powerful economic asset. Ultimately, the Trump era put the two countries' reputations into the sharpest focus. USA, power, chaos, unpredictable. Canada, stable, welcoming, cooperative, polite. So did all this reputational change actually lead to countries pivoting towards Canada? The evidence suggests it wasn't just talk, there were concrete shifts in diplomatic and economic focus. Look at the European Union. Faced with an American administration that called the EU a foe on trade, European leaders began to actively strengthen their partnership with Canada. The Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, came into effect. It was championed as a model for progressive, rules-based trade, a direct counter-narrative to the protectionist winds blowing from Washington. It wasn't just Europe. In Asia, nations that had banked on the TPP found a willing and eager partner in Canada to salvage the deal. Japan in particular worked closely with Canada to lead the charge for the revised CPTPP. This was a significant diplomatic pivot. For decades, America was the key economic and security partner for many Asian nations, but with the US stepping back, countries like Japan, Australia, and Vietnam saw Canada as a crucial G7 partner to help maintain balance and uphold a rules-based order. Canada wasn't replacing America, but it was stepping into a leadership vacuum America had created. Take the competition for a non-permanent seat on the UN Security Council. While Canada ultimately lost its bid in 2020, its campaign was centered on being a global convener and bridge builder. The campaign itself reinforced Canada's brand on the world stage. This shift wasn't about countries abandoning the United States entirely. The US economy, military, and cultural influence are far too massive for that. Instead, it was a strategic hedging of bets. It was about diversification. Countries that had previously put all their diplomatic eggs in the American basket started looking for other baskets, and Canada's looked sturdy and reliable. Nations began to build a more multi-layered network of alliances where Canada played a more central and influential role than ever before. So, what's the final verdict? Is the world permanently choosing Canada, trading in its stars and stripes for a maple leaf? The reality is probably a bit more complicated than a simple switch. The United States is and will remain a global superpower. Economic might, military might. No country, not even one as well regarded as Canada, can simply replace that. However, the Trump presidency acted as a catalyst, forcing the world to reevaluate its over-reliance on American leadership. It wasn't that the world fell out of love with America, but it definitely started seeing other people. And Canada was right there, dependable, surprisingly charming. This shift, even if not a full replacement, could have lasting implications, accelerating a trend toward a more multipolar world, influence more diffused, not concentrated solely in Washington. Countries learned the importance of strategic autonomy, diversified alliances. Canada carved a more prominent niche, a reliable middle power, a champion of the rules-based order. The future depends on what the United States does next. A return to predictable American foreign policy could restore some equilibrium. But the memory of Trump-era volatility will linger. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. So, hedging bets, cultivating stronger ties with stable partners like Canada, that's likely to continue. Trump's moves didn't make the world choose Canada instead of the US, but they made the world choose Canada as well. It opened a door for Canada onto the global stage. In that multipolar world, the quiet, reliable neighbor to the north has a very important voice.